We are just about 27% and not at the 40 to 50%, of course, but closely linked, of course, with the export story is, of course, our own domestic manufacturing story, because if you don't manufacture, how do we export? So I want to bring in at this point Dr. Rajan Sudesh Ratna, Deputy Head and Senior Economic Affairs at ESCAP. Sir, thank you so much for your time. Talking purely about the manufacturing story, and let's actually pull up those graphics and see. In H1 of FY25, that is the last financial year, we saw manufacturing grow about 4.8%. Now, compare that to H1 of FY26, which is this financial year. I'm talking about Q1 plus Q2 of the last financial year and Q1 of Q2 of this financial year. A very positive discrepancy in the numbers. Because H1 to H1 comparison, manufacturing grew 4.8% in the last financial year and has grown as much as 8.4% in this financial year. And it is this financial year where we were actually also hit by tariffs. So the incentive to manufacture more and export more was potentially limited in Q1 and Q2 of this financial year.
Thank you. You are right in that sense. But what we need to also understand that when we are looking at, and as has been very clearly laid down, that is how it starts with that global uncertainty and specifically talking about the US tariffs. Now, if you look at the options for the domestic industry, and when we look at the domestic production, definitely it has increased because, as has already earlier speakers also have talked about, for India, it is not only the export, but also our domestic consumption has been one of the strengths. And that has been illustrated even during the COVID time, that while the world at large faced a greater challenge in terms of their economic growth, and they found more of a negative trend, India was little better off than that. That was because of its own domestic demand. And therefore, this also reflect that the exporters also perhaps started looking at the domestic market, and they found that opportunity, and especially in the white goods and automobile and other white goods segment, the demand also saw an increase. As has been pointed out earlier, that we saw in the earlier quarter 8.2 growth, which came mostly from the construction and services. So there is a whole supply chain. So when you're talking about construction, and when you are talking about the services, definitely there is something which also gets into from the manufacturing sector into these, and the overall demand which has led. But one need to really see out of these how much went into the public sector and how much went into the private sector, because that could also be the key, because a lot of government expenditure also is going into the construction and others. So
absolutely
need to be really evaluated whether the manufacturing in the domestic market is headed towards or is aligned towards more of a government funded initiatives and construction and other or demand, or is it private led or private consumers led?
I want to quickly move on now to Mr. Aman Agarwal, Director Professor, Indian Institute of Finance. And I want to pivot away from manufacturing and construction to actually the services sector. And again, the services sector completely dependent mostly on business coming in from the US. We've seen how the US economy has fared. We've seen the data on months that it came and months that it did not come because of the government shutdown of the federal accounting systems. But overall, interest rates also haven't been cut by the FOMC last night. So overall, the services story continues to be tepid, also in line with AI and the fact that India has not really been able to cross over that line when it comes to making AI models as part of product delivery from the services industry. So overall, if you look at the numbers for services, you're looking at a growth, an annualized growth still of about 9.1%. I want to understand from you, Mr. Agarwal, this 9.1% estimated growth faster than the overall GDP growth of 7.4%. Where is this number really likely to come from?
You see, the services sector's contribution over the last 2 decades has increased slowly and steadily. And this has also been a contribution primarily because of the bifurcation post 1990 from moving from agriculture and manufacturing to including services as well. So large number of segments have moved out of these two segments coming into services. And that has led to a large creation of the services sector in this country. Roughly about 65% of the total GDP contribution is coming from services. Now, that is not primarily dependent on the US in particular. We have services sector contribution coming in from Asia, from even Europe, which actually deals with services component. So to think that we are totally dependent on the US for our growth component is wrong. And this can be clearly visible from the last 2 or 3 quarters. Despite the threats and the tariffs being posed by Trump, the growth numbers have actually been very well taken up in the last 3 quarters in particular. And this is clearly visible in the economic survey as well. So to say that we are dependent on the US for services is wrong. We are very well diversified and globally placed. The services sector, I don't think will grow too much extensively because there is an extensive focus of the government in terms of introducing and fostering agriculture and manufacturing in the last 2 years in particular. And this is going to help both these sectors grow up. So as a contribution to GDP, the services sector's contribution may remain stable or go down. But as an absolute value, as you have rightly pointed out, it is growing up. And I think that is something which is going to talk about the employability, the employment structure, and the way the human capital is going to be valued going forward.
You're quite right in your observation. In fact, we haven't really seen the growth come down as a contribution to GDP. In fact, we've seen a slight uptick in growth for the services sector. In fact, if you compare the numbers, you look at the last financial year and the advanced final estimates for this financial year, the services sector has contributed as much as 49.9% in the last financial year and is likely to contribute as much as 51.1% to the GDP this financial year. So overall, despite whatever we are seeing as headwinds in the global economy as well as India's own domestic drivers, we are seeing that the service sector has indeed been resilient and has only shown growth. At this moment, let me also introduce Mr. Umesh Kumar Tulsian, Managing Director of Sovereign Global, who joins us in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast, sir. I'm not sure if you've been able to look at the glimpses of the economic survey.
Just traveling,
yeah, but I just want to understand from you, I think on the pure division of GDP and the components that make up the GDP of the country, it seems that agriculture's contribution, and agriculture including livestock, forestry and fishing, is likely to be about 15.2%. Services likely to be in the driver's seat with 51.1%, and industry, which includes your manufacturing, mining, electricity, construction, all put together contributing about 24.3%. So a forward-looking question, it shows that right now we are still a services-driven economy, although in the last 5 budgets or so, the focus has really been on pushing the manufacturing story forward. Now, with this data pretty much being in line with what we've seen as a trend over the last many years, where do you think the focus of the union budget should really be?
I think we are already done some tax rationalization. We have done the GST rationalization, and most probably you've seen the urban consumptions are going up. The rural consumptions are still dipping. So I think budget should focus more on rural consumption. They should see how the income of the rural economy can be increased. The per capita income is decreasing day by day. We have to work on the per capita income of the rural economy. I think these are the main areas where budget should focus now.
Okay.